Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Get Hired with me, Bill, the company's expert. This is the live stream where we talk about everything related to getting hired. So resumes, job interviews, recruiters, where to find jobs, all that kind of stuff. And this is primarily a Q&A. So if you see my beautiful shining face this morning, get in the chat. You should see a chat box nearby and let me know if you have any questions. I've been told I need to amp up my live stream, so I've been looking for suggestions for how to do that. You got to keep people guessing, of course. So I don't know. You got to introduce myself as Bill. Is this about my mother, the company's expert, and broadcasting to you live from beautiful downtown Tokyo, as you can see behind me, the beautiful downtown nighttime Tokyo skyline. And yes, I will be here to answer all your questions. So yes, and the title of today's episode is How Recruiters Think When Selecting Candidates. And the subtitle is The Decision Points and Criteria Recruiters Use to Screen Out Candidates and Select Successful Applicants. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. This is a tiny subset of getting a job, namely going through recruiters. It is not as prevalent as a lot of people would have you believe, usually because the people that are talking about hiring and all that happen to be recruiters. So naturally, they talk about getting a job by going through a recruiter. In fact, don't take my word for this, it's not the most common way that people get a job. Most people get a job through some form of networking. They don't get a job by applying cold to an internet job posting and then trying to get an interview and then talking to a recruiter and all that. Usually they have some sort of connection on the inside that has recommended them for the job or suggested that they apply for the job and is part of the decision-making process. So that's usually how that works. But today we're going to be talking about this tiny subset of jobs where you have to actually interview with the recruiter. And it's how to get an interview and then what to say when you're in the interview. How recruiters think, how they perceive your answers, how they perceive you, how they make a first impression of you, and then how they make their decision based on what you've said and everything you've presented to them. Okay, that's what we're going to be talking about. And while we're waiting for the questions to roll in, I'm going to talk about this stuff. First of all, I want to thank all my channel members, all my super thanks donors, all the participants of this live stream, all my Patreons, and everyone else that is supporting me and telling me that this is something I should do. So let's get into it. Okay. Now, hopefully everybody here understands the difference between a hiring manager and a recruiter. This is something I've covered many times. For those just starting out, a recruiter is someone that works in the HR department. And the HR department is the department of the company that deals with employees, right? You might have a sales and marketing department, they deal with customers, but the HR department deals with employees, right? So one of their functions is recruitment and selection, is this. So you get a lot of recruiters that deal specifically with hiring people. Okay, so a lot of the times they are the ones posting the jobs. When you find them online, you see like a job description or a job posting, and they're the ones that do at least the first round of interviewing candidates, right? Usually the way it works is that because they work in the HR department, they're not super familiar with the job that they're posting because they have received a request from a different part of the company that says, you know, we need a new employee in this department. And it could be any department. It could be, you know, a warehouse. It could be a sales department. It could be executive job, you know, doing strategy. It could be in the accounting department, right? So the recruiter is not an expert in any of those. They're not accountants. They're not salespeople. They're not inventory people. They just deal with HR. So where they're an expert is they tend to have more expertise on things like labor laws. They would know legally all the things you have to do to hire someone and have it all above board and done properly. Okay, so that's where their expertise are, right? The thing that's kind of misleading is that these are usually the people that you encounter when you do a job interview. So they might bring you in for an accounting job and you're interviewing with them, but they're not an accountant. So that's the first kind of thing that is a bit weird in this situation. You saw a job posting for a forklift operator in a warehouse. You apply for the job, and then they tell you, okay, come in for an interview. And then you interview with a recruiter. Now, the recruiter doesn't know anything about forklifts or warehouses, but yet that's the person that is deciding whether you are a promising candidate to get the forklift operator job. So it's a bit of a strange situation. And a lot of younger job seekers that haven't really gone through this process before, understandably, it's kind of weird and you don't really know, how to answer certain questions or, how to give a good impression to a person who doesn't understand anything about forklifts or warehouses. So this is why I wanted to do this topic in the live stream. And by the way, if you'd like me to talk about any specific thing in future to make it a subject of a live stream, let me know what you think that should be, because I'm looking for suggestions. There are 24 people here. Thank you for joining me. Yes, while we are waiting for questions to roll in, I guess I will talk about this. But feel free to jump in any time with questions. Okay, so, and just so everyone understands the lingo, internally in a company, let's say there's a warehouse and you have the manager of the warehouse, and the manager of the warehouse manager, they're the ones that have decided that I need to hire a forklift operator, okay? So they send a request to a recruiter in the HR department. They say, okay, I need you to hire a forklift operator. And the recruiter says, okay, no problem. Send me the requirements. What should this person have in your opinion? And if you could give me a brief description of the job itself, that would help. And I will take that information, I will write up the job posting, and then I will post it. And I will do the initial screening of candidates. Or if you'd prefer to be present for that, you can. But unless you specifically request that, normally I just do the initial screening myself. Okay, so that's what's going on internally. So sometimes when you go to a job interview, you're talking to just the recruiter. Other times, you're talking to the recruiter and the warehouse manager. Okay, what's the term for the warehouse manager? That's called the hiring manager. It's the specific person within the company that has requested that they hire a new employee to work for them. That's what a hiring manager is. They are not an expert in labor laws. They work in the warehouse, so they understand the forklift job and they understand, warehousing and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of times you will interview with one or both of these people. And as you can appreciate, these are different people that have different skill sets and they have knowledge in different areas. So when they ask you a question, you might have to say different things to kind of speak to them and give them an answer they recognize and they can understand and regard as good. Okay? So that's the difference between a recruiter and a hiring manager. So today we're talking about recruiters specifically. Okay? As I said, everything I say from now on will be just about recruiters. So a recruiter, they don't understand the technical details of the job. They were told that they need to select a candidate that has certain things. And so their job is to go out and find candidates with all those things. That's how they get paid. That's how they do their job successfully. Once you have presented the hiring manager with several candidates that seem to all have those things, then the hiring manager can make a final decision on which one they pick. Or sometimes it's entirely left to a recruiter. Usually that's not the right way of doing things, but that does happen. So because everybody's going to be interviewing with a recruiter, at least initially, It's very important to understand how these people think and how they assess candidates. Okay, the first thing that I would say about this is because the recruiter doesn't understand anything about the technical details of the job, like if they're hiring for a forklift driver, forklift operator, how would you evaluate somebody in a job where you know nothing about that job? How would you go about doing it? Well, if you're told that they need to have this qualification and they need to have this skill and they need to have 2 years experience doing this duty, this job function, that's what you're going to stick to. The problem is that in a lot of industries, people use different words to describe those same things. So maybe there's a slang expression for driving a forklift. Instead of saying operating a forklift, you say, moving stock, something like that. I spent 4 years moving stock. And maybe that's an industry slang expression that means I operated a forklift or other similar vehicle in a warehouse setting. Well, if you go to the interview and you talk all about moving stock, the recruiter is not going to understand what the hell you're talking about, right? So you have to use the same words that they are familiar with. So if the job description says forklift operator experience, you need to make sure that you use the term forklift operator experience because, that's what they recognize, but they won't understand the term moving stock if that's a equivalent of it. Okay, you got to use their lingo. Very important. This is important for the resume stage where you apply for the job. You got to use the term forklift operator in there, not moving stock. And then when you go to the interview and you're talking to the recruiter, you have to use the term forklift operator, not moving stock, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Felix is here. Felix says, hello, how's it going? That's good because you didn't say, hello, how's it going? Right? There's a lot of people that put like LOLs and stuff and like between words in like every sentence that they write, which I always wonder about, It's like, if you actually talk to a person like that, it would be weird. They'd get a whole other, meaning from what you're saying than what I think you're trying to say. So that's good. Already, Felix, you're crushing it. So that's the first thing about recruiters is the lingo. The second thing that's super important is that, one would think that recruiters would want to find the best candidate, right? The most qualified, right? That's what one would assume. That's not actually true. That's not the way recruiters are trained to think. I can say this because I trained recruiters in university. This is not how it's done. I did a video on this recently. The fundamental belief that kind of underscores what recruiters do and how they regard jobs and how you fill those jobs is the idea that employees are fungible. It means like one is as good as the next, right? For example, when let's say you own a car and you go and you buy gasoline for your car, you regard gasoline as fungible. Like whether you buy the gasoline from this gas station or that gas station, doesn't matter. It's all the same, right? That's what fungible means. So recruiters are trained to regard employees as fungible. I know that there's this effort to try and create this perception that, they regard everybody as individuals with very specific skills and, individual traits that really matter and stuff. That's not actually the case. HR is very schizophrenic. It has been for a very long time. On the one hand, you have a school of thought where they care about individual psychology and thought process and motivation, things like this, leadership, how that works. But then on the other hand, think of the name. They changed it decades ago from personnel to human resources. And the reason they did that was because they The theory was that you would treat employees like any other resource. You would treat them like raw materials, like inventory, like energy, like production facilities. If you want a certain number of products, it's almost like, how do you get a plant to grow? You have soil, you have seeds, you add water, you get a flower, right? If you want products to be sold, you add a manufacturing facility or a production facility, you add energy, you add raw materials, you add employees, you get a product that then you then sell. It's the idea that you're going to treat employees like any other resource. So it's very dehumanizing. And that's the school of thought that was the foundation of modern hiring practices. Despite some efforts to try and make it more personal, this is what came in the 19th century, actually, with a lot of advances in management. Anyway, so they regard one employee to be as good as the next. They don't see like, this individual is brilliant, whereas this one, I don't know, I think they lack ambition. Like, they don't really think like that, fundamentally, and they will not indicate this during any part of the process. But the idea is that what they're looking for, instead of the most qualified candidate, is they're looking for the least risky candidate. And this forms the strategy behind a lot of the questions they ask in a job interview. For example, they're looking for red flags. When they ask you, how much salary do you need? It's not because they're trying to accommodate you. It's because they're trying to eliminate you if you ask for too much. If you're wanting too much money, that's a red flag to them that, if I hire this person, they may leave very soon because they'll get a better job somewhere else, or they'll be disgruntled. They have a higher likelihood of being disgruntled with the compensation. They feel they deserve more, and so they are demotivated and they won't do the job very well, right? The reason why they ask you, why did you leave your last job, was because if you say you were fired, they see that as a red flag. I'm getting a sample of this person's behavior. They're the type of person that gets fired. So if they got fired in the past, I believe they have a higher likelihood of getting fired in this role if we hire them, right? They've demonstrated that behavior in the past, so it's logical to assume they could demonstrate it again in the future, far more than a person who has never been fired, right? Now, this is how they're thinking. They're playing the odds. It's not pinpoint accurate, but they're just playing percentages here. What is your weakness? They want to see, what's your flaw? You have this flaw. That could be an issue. If the only thing I know about you is that you're a person, you have brown hair, and you have this flaw, I may not want to hire you, because if you have that flaw, that might impact your performance, right? You may not get along with other employees because of that flaw or something, right? So they're looking for things that would give you a higher likelihood of not working out. So it's all about risk aversion, right? It's not finding the best, most qualified candidate. It's finding the least risky candidate. That's the first thing everyone needs to know about this process. Okay, we have Bernard or Bernard. I don't know how you say that. Some people say Bernard, some people say Bernard. I vote for Bernard myself. It's got a nice hard consonant at the beginning. It's like getting a slap in the face before you've even said anything. Good evening, Daddy. Okay, that's a promising start. Please, I want to know why it is that you have all the qualifications and experience, but recruiters will not come back to you. Thank you. Because it's not about qualifications and experience. Here's how this works. When you submit your application, okay, your job application, your resume and whatever other additional things they want, okay? And if you get called back for an interview, that signals that on paper, according to your application, you are qualified to do the job, in their opinion. You see, they're never going to call back someone who appears to be unqualified for the job. That doesn't make any sense. That's a waste of their time. Because even if they met you and you turned out to be a fabulously wonderful, awesome person, to interact with. And you dressed fantastic and you looked fantastic and you said all the right things. The problem is that on paper, you're not qualified, so you're disqualified from doing the job, right? So the only people that they will call back are people that on paper appear qualified, okay? The reason I say this is because when you get to a job interview, they ask questions about, your experience and your education. So it gives you the illusion that they're trying to investigate further whether you're qualified or not. They're really not. I mean, assuming that you haven't lied on your resume and assuming that, their understanding of what your resume says is the reality, they haven't misunderstood what you said or something, you're qualified, okay, in their opinion. The job interview is really all about who you are as a person, what you're like, and if you have any of these red flags that I was starting to talk about 5 minutes ago, okay? That's really what the job interview is about. The other thing you need to know is that a lot of publicly posted jobs, they get a lot of applicants, like sometimes 100, sometimes several hundred. And the problem is that finding people who are qualified is actually not that hard. I'm sure you've experienced applying for jobs where like the job itself, when you read it, it seemed like a little bit of a stretch, but you still felt you were qualified to do it, right? Well, that's probably true. You are qualified to do it. I mean, okay, maybe if you need 6 months of a learning curve when you start, I mean, who cares? Then you're up to speed and you can do it as good as anyone else or as well as anyone else, right? So just being qualified is not really much of a hurdle. A lot of applicants that apply are qualified, right? They then have to resort to other criteria to narrow down that pool of candidates, right? For example, first come, first serve might be one of the criteria. So, maybe they post the job and then they get inundated with applications. So what they do is they basically say, okay, we're only going to look at the people that applied in the first 24 hours. That's 250 people. We're going to limit to the first, 24 hours worth of applicants, right? You may have applied when the job was up for over 24 hours, maybe a day and a half, and you didn't get an interview. It has nothing to do with how qualified you were. You could have been Albert Einstein. You could have been a genius with incredible qualifications. You still wouldn't have, been selected. And it has nothing to do with how qualified you are. It's a numbers game. Felix says, HR is schizophrenic. That's a good quote. It's true. It's true. They have two conflicting schools of thought that drive the current study of HR. One says people are people, that they're individuals with emotions and individuality. Another school of thought says that they are all fungible, they're all identical. You treat them, a person is a person is a person is a person. You can see that when they say, oh, our profits are down this quarter, so we've decided to lay off 10% of our workforce so that we make our numbers for the shareholders, right? They're not treating people like people. They're treating them like a resource. Like we've decided to cut down on our inventory by 50% to make our numbers for next quarter. We've decided to cut down on our employees by 10%, right? You're not treating people like people. You're treating people like objects, like cattle, like numbers. That's the other conflicting thought. And they've shoehorned these two ideas together in HR. And that's why you get a lot of weird contradictions. On the one hand, the company wants you to believe we're all a big family and, we care about you. But then they'll send you these highly impersonal emails written in legalese that go out to everybody, and they treat you like a number, right? So which is it? I'm getting mixed signals. Carmiago. I thought that was like Carmen Sandiego for a second. Carmiago says, love to see you, Bill. Thank you for the lives. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes. I'm doing these on Monday these days. The next couple of weeks, I'll have my side hustle ideas live stream on Monday morning. And then after that, I might bring back the leadership live stream if people want to see that. You guys let me know what you're interested in, and I will try and accommodate. M Star says, thank you for sharing this. It's great to understand how HR sees things. Please share how temp agencies view prospective employees, what to watch out for. Thanks. Temp agencies are like you want to talk about fungible employees. Temp agencies are the kings and queens of that, right? They take into account less individuality, and it's all about just, you got this qualification, are you available? Okay, we'll put you forward for this. Felix says, if the job posting states that the first interview is with people and culture, I'm assuming an HR representative, that means I should only prepare for behavioral questions, not technical ones, right? Well, I wouldn't say don't prepare technical questions. I mean, you can always be asked anything, and you never know who's going to be in the meeting. You could very well have an HR representative and a hiring manager. So I wouldn't like specifically say don't prepare for this. But yes, I mean, listen, this is like flavor of the month management corporate BS when they use these terms like people and culture. You see, they're using that term like they assume you know what it means. And I mean, I haven't looked it up. Maybe it means something, but I mean, I've never encountered that as a specific term that means a certain thing in the hiring process. So, I mean, I don't know if that's like a DEI thing or like, I don't know. To me, it seems like anyone who would use that term, first of all, this is a big company you're dealing with. This is a large multinational organization, or at least it's like a huge bureaucracy. And this is a concoction of the HR department independently of any hiring manager. That's what I am assuming and guessing. But listen, the reality is that all job interviews are not really about technical skills. They're about who you are as a person. Okay. For example, you could be the most qualified person in the world on paper. And in reality, you've got a lot of experience. You've got a lot of accomplishments, right? But as a person, you're arrogant, you're off-putting, you take offense very easily. You are hyper-aggressive when you deal with other people, which is very off-putting, and you get offended very easily, and all kinds of negative personal traits, right? Now, if that was the case, would you be a good candidate? Would they want to hire you? No. Because yes, on paper, you've got all these accomplishments, but the first time they meet you, everybody in the room agrees, we don't want to work with that person. You know what I'm saying? So that negates, your qualifications very easily, right? Or maybe you're the nicest person ever. You're awesome. They would love to work with you. Everyone that meets you immediately likes you and they want to interact with you again soon, right? That's great. On paper, you're qualified. You've got a lot of education, a lot of relevant experience, and a lot of accomplishments. Great. But it turns out that, you're expecting to be paid a lot of money for this, like almost as much as your boss. And you have a history of quitting the last 5 jobs that you've worked at within 6 months. And for the last 2 years, you haven't been employed. You've got a big work gap. Those things will negate how wonderful you are as a person, and they'll negate how qualified you are in paper. They don't care that you've got this master's degree from Harvard. They don't care that you've got all this insider experience working with the best companies in the business all over the world, right where the action is. They don't care about that if you show these red flags, right? Because that means there's a high likelihood that you won't stay and you won't be satisfied doing the job. And if that occurs, it's embarrassing for the recruiter who hired you and the hiring manager that approved you as a new employee. It signals that they don't know what they're doing. That's especially bad for the recruiter because the recruiter's entire business, their core competency, is picking winners, and you clearly were not someone that worked out. So the fact that they picked you turned out to be a mistake, and now they look bad, right? So that's kind of some of the things that are going on there. Now, I just want to assure everybody, can you hear me when I talk, when someone stops and talks really slow and seriously like this, you know it's serious. I want to assure everybody that if some of the things I'm saying are discouraging to you, don't worry, because as I said at the beginning, going through a recruiter in response to a posted internet job is not the way the majority of people get hired. There are other ways of getting a job, usually through back channels, usually that will lead to much better jobs, and it's a much more positive process. So I've talked about that on many other occasions. It's also in this course if you want to get the full meal deal on that. But this is a special case we're talking about today. It's about going through a recruiter when you've applied for a publicly posted job. Okay. My microphone stand is slowly falling down. I'm going to put this up here. Now, if this disappears out of view, you'll know that something's going on there. Let's see. Okay, Felix says, or maybe dropping a few keywords wouldn't hurt, I guess. Yes, I was talking about that like 5 to 10 minutes ago. Kuma's Paw says, the company I'm at is holding back people making lateral moves, but also holding back many promotions. I found out I was held back from a promotion too. Would this be a sign that it's time to move? Listen, I'm not going to tell you to quit your job and to move. It could be, but it depends on what's going on behind the scenes. Listen, contrary to popular belief, companies don't necessarily care about your career track. They don't care about promoting you. They will promote you if it serves their purpose, but they don't really care about you. It's like they're acting in their own self-interest, as we all do, as you are doing. You know, you care about yourself. Why would you want to move? It's because you want to do what's right for you. You will end up in a better place if you move, right? So you're looking out for yourself. They're doing the same thing. So that means, you know, intentionally trying to promote their own employees is not necessarily a priority for them. They will do it if it makes sense for them. Now, what you find a lot of the time is that if you are hired to do a very specific job, you work in, you work at the worker level and you fulfill a certain function. You know, you do data analysis in the statistics department, or you do repairs, you know, you work as a technician and you repair equipment as part of the, technical support division, you know, something like that, right? They didn't hire you to be a manager. They hired you to be a technician. Now, after you've worked in the technician role for 2 years, 5 years, you might be wanting to be promoted. You say like, look, I know this job inside out. I've been here for a while. I really honestly feel I could do my boss's job, what I've seen that person do. I don't think it's beyond me. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm certainly capable of doing it. I think I'm ready to do it, right? Maybe my boss is leaving, they're retiring, or they're moving on. There's going to be a vacancy. I would like to put myself forward for it, right? So that would be the best thing for you. But here's the deal. Let's say your boss leaves, and let's say the company does decide to promote you, right? So number one, they've got a new employee in the manager position. Okay, so you're now learning the ropes of how to be the manager, and you're going to be on a learning curve. It's going to take you a few months maybe to fully do that job as efficiently as maybe your previous boss did. So they're going to take a bit of a hit, while they wait for you to get over the learning curve. In addition, though, because you've moved up, you've created a vacancy in the technician role. They now also need to hire a new technician to replace you in that role. Now, you're going to be learning the manager job. You may not be freely available to take a new employee under your wing and show them the ropes of how to do the technician job. You've got your hands full just learning the manager job. So that's two roles that they've got to essentially take a hit on, right? The manager job, because you're learning the ropes, and the technician job, because they got to hire someone and then wait for them to really get over the learning curve. That's a lot of hits. Now think about if your manager leaves, but instead of promoting you, they hire a new employee in the manager role. Think of their perspective. Okay, there's no disruption to the technician roles because you're a veteran technician, you know your stuff, and you're still in the role. There's no disruption there. There is a disruption with the manager role, but they can hire an employee that's been working as a manager for many years. Now, look, from their perspective, it may seem like there's really not going to be any disruption in the manager role, or it'll be minimal, because this person is already a manager. They already know how to do that job. Yeah, it's at a different company, but basically the same thing, same role. So it's less disruption to do that, right? There's less moving around. So for that reason, companies will maybe hire an external candidate to fill a role rather than promote one of the subordinates up. And this seems counterintuitive to a lot of subordinates. They're like, why didn't I get that job? I've been here for years. You know, I mean, come on, haven't I proven myself? You know I'm reliable. You know I'm on board with all the company values, blah, blah, blah. Why didn't I get that job? It's for that reason. It's less disruption. Okay? So sometimes they'll promote an internal employee if it makes sense. If what they're looking for is someone that they know makes good decisions, and other people at the company personally recommend you, that might carry a lot of weight. But if they're just looking at how much disruption there is during this transition, they may choose not to promote anybody and instead hire an outside candidate. It depends on a bunch of factors. It's a long-winded answer. "35 people here. I hope you guys like hearing me just ramble on like this, because apparently I'm good at it. Brevity is not, apparently is not a thing of mine. Okay. Felix says, gotcha, appreciate it. Not a problem. Not a problem, Felix. That was an intelligent question also earlier. M-Star, how do you overcome their objections when you have a long employment gap due to family needs? Sometimes you just can't, because recruiters are trained to regard a work gap as a risk. It makes you a high-risk candidate. Now, look, this is the problem. They're trying to make judgments about you without having to get to know you. They don't know you. You're a stranger. So they're playing the odds. And the way they're trained, it says that a work gap is risky. How do you overcome this and still get a job? Usually you don't go through a recruiter. Okay, that's the simple answer. Because recruiters are trained to regard a work gap as bad. They don't know what the reason for the work gap is. And even if you give a reason, they don't know if that's true. And they have no way to find out if that's true. Right? There's a limit to what they can find out about you. Even with like background checks and things, there's a limit to what they can find out. So at the end, they have to trust you. And they don't, because you're a stranger. Nobody trusts a stranger. You have to sort of think of like, what's likely? Is it likely that this is, the truth, or is it not, right? So the bottom line is you could be really swimming uphill to try and get a recruiter to regard you, to pick you when you have a work gap. You would have to have a very, very good reason. You have to really convince them. And a lot of times it's just not possible, So this also, by the way, is the same thing for anyone changing careers. You have the same problem. How do you convince a recruiter you can do a job when you've never done that job? Same problem. The short answer is that recruiters will just immediately assume you can't do the job. You're not qualified. no matter how ridiculous that might be in your situation. So the solution, how do people change careers? They don't go through recruiters. They go to hiring managers and things like this directly. You know, you have a conversation with a hiring manager. The hiring manager sees that you're highly capable, you're highly motivated, you know your stuff, you're very professional, you have great communication skills, you know, you really know your stuff. So if they need to fill a position, they may say, you know what, I'll take a chance on you. I think, you know, you could do this. They'll watch you very closely, but they'll, you know, a lot of hiring managers will give you a chance if you've shown all those other soft skills, right? So that's how people change careers, and that's also how people get over work gaps. Like if you're rejoining the workforce after many years of being a homemaker or something, you know, what's a work gap? You say it's because you're a homemaker. You say it's because you had to take care of kids or a sick family member. They don't know if that's true or not. That could be all a smokescreen hiding the fact that you were fired spectacularly in your last position, and no one will hire you because you've got some thing in your past or some thing that's wrong with you in their eyes, right? They don't know. So they're playing the odds. So if that's how they think, you go around them. Josh man. It's the Josh man. Yeah, we all know the Josh man. You know the Josh man. Hello, I'm applying to musically direct at a theater. The recruiter is the previous musical director. Okay, so that would be a hiring manager. We know each other, but he looks down on me. No valid reason. How do I try and change his mind? Maybe a left hook followed by a right uppercut. I'm not sure. It depends on what's going on there. You obviously know the person. They obviously have some preconceived notions about you. They have a certain perception of you. So it depends what that is and what's the reason for it. It may not be possible to change their mind. Just be prepared for that. But, you know, it could be something where they're not fully informed of your background or your accomplishments. Or perhaps they've been fed some information or some misinformation that's caused them to have a, you know, inaccurate perception of you, something like that. You know, in which case maybe, you know, you could get someone that you both mutually know to put in a good word for you. I don't know. It depends what the source of that is. You see, like if you know the source, then you can find a plan to overcome it. But without knowing what the root of this is, it's kind of hard to say what to do about it. Now, sometimes it might be possible, okay, it may be possible, if you've got great social skills, great personal interaction skills, it may be possible to ask them directly, you know, and say like, you know, there are some job interview questions where recruiters ask you at the end of an interview, do you have any questions for us? And, you know, you say things like, well, you know, is there anything that, like the standard kind of line is there anything you've seen in other candidates that you haven't seen in me that I could perhaps speak to? Right? So you're kind of saying like, well, if you do have an issue with me, tell me what it is, and maybe I can, you know, persuade you. Maybe I can overcome your objections. Right? So it may be possible to do that if you've got great communication skills. If you don't, that can backfire depending on how you do it. Okay, but I would try and find out, if possible, what the issue is, and then you know what to address. Okay, and the other thing is, don't just go on assumptions, because humans have a tendency to, you know, if you don't understand why something is happening, people tend to jump to, oh, it's bias. It's bias. It's favoritism. They don't like me because they're a bigot, you know, or something. Like, you know, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. That does happen sometimes, but a lot of times that's not it. It's something else that they're not telling you that they need to see, but they're not seeing. Maybe they're not seeing it because you don't have it, or maybe they're not seeing it because you have it, but you just haven't communicated it clearly enough for them to understand that you have it. You know, there's all kinds of problems with this communication process. Okay, someone else says, do you believe that employers pay more attention to someone's actual experience and accomplishments or more about their degrees? Interested in what you're going to answer, keep up with the content. Oh, well, that varies. You get both extremes. If you're trying to get a job as, say, a teacher in a university, they will care about your education because they regard that as super important. Maybe more than it should. You know what I'm saying? And then you get the opposite in industries. If you're interviewing with a hiring manager who has never been to school, like they've got maybe high school, if that, and you've got all these fancy degrees that will show that, you really know what you're doing, they won't respect your education because they themselves don't respect education. So they will put maybe a distorted weight on your experience rather than your education. It depends on the perception of the person evaluating you. There aren't like absolute value scales for these things. It's about how people perceive them. And also you get some industries where they care more about one or the other. You also get some organizations that care more about one or the other. I've had a lot of experience in that area personally. Okay? So you have no control over that. It's about like what their personal value system is. And you just happen to talk to a person that has never been to school and they look down on anyone who has. They think, you think you're so smart, but you're not. That's their worldview. It might be impossible to change their mind. They could be completely wrong, and it's impossible to get them to see sense, and you can see the opposite. You can see people that like, you've never done anything in the real world, but you've got this master's degree, so they think you can do anything. And we've seen that a lot too. And that's also been shown to fail spectacularly. So it's not about changing someone's mind. It's about doing this process again and again until you just happen to be in front of a person who just happens to value the things that you personally have, in which case they think you're awesome and they're totally biased for you, and then they select you, right? That's how this goes. And it's just a roll of the dice. Sam Britton says, had an interview with a hiring manager this past Friday. He made it seem like I will move on to second interview. I don't have or can't find his email. Should I contact the company for his email and follow up? Well, first of all, I would look on LinkedIn if you haven't already done so. That would be the place to look. If you know the person's name and you obviously know the company that employs them, you might be able to find them on LinkedIn. In which case, I would contact him through LinkedIn. Okay. If you can get his email, great. Now, the way to do this is, in this day and age, I know it's weird, but people still use paper business cards. Okay. I think I still have a whole bunch of mine here somewhere. But, what you do is when you go to a job interview, you can print these things up for extremely cheap. And all you do is you put your name, your tagline, and then your contact information. So I would say Bill Todd, former CEO, and then my contact information, phone number, email address, maybe my social media, profile or whatever, LinkedIn profile, phone number. And maybe if you feel like it, you could put a little picture of yourself. So like visually they remember, it's this person, I met them. Now, when you give your business card to people, you take it out of your pocket, you give it to people, that's an instant sort of trigger for them to give you theirs if they have one. Okay, so the great thing is you walk away from job interviews with, here's the recruiter's card, here's the hiring manager's card, here's the other person's card that was in the meeting. Right, so you've got that stuff. Now, sometimes they intentionally obfuscate this. They don't want you to know who they are so that you can contact them. In which case, that's kind of a red flag to me. It's like, if you're paranoid, you don't want people to contact you. Why are you paranoid? Is it because you have people mad at you? And is there a reason for that? Like, why would you be afraid that people contact you? Especially in this industry, in this game of like hiring people and stuff, like making connections. You want connections, you know? So that is a red flag for me if they're trying really hard to like not be discovered. Okay, so I wouldn't worry too much about that if like they've gone to lengths to like not leave any kind of footprint and not tell you their contact information. It's not a big loss in my opinion. It's like a sign of a bad organization or bad individuals. If you can find it, follow up and just say, it was a pleasure meeting you the other day. I look forward to meeting you again and having another conversation with you if we get that far. Until then, take care. You know, something like that. Something very benign. Kuma's pause says, makes sense. I know me moving would cause a disruption in my department, but I know what I need to do now. Thank you. Yeah, look out for yourself. I mean, like, if your best interests align with the company, great. You know, then you guys work together. But if they go in different directions, like, you know, it's best for the company if you do this, but it's better for you if you do that, then you gotta look out for yourself. That's what they're doing. And you can take it from me. I know about this. That's what they're doing. So you do the same. AKM Toom or Toomey says, I made it to the final interview and shortly after was asked to submit names of 3 references. Okay, that's normal. On several occasions, I later got a regret. Okay, I am in BC, Canada, and I have heard several other people. Other people have talked to, had a similar experience. I'm originally from Manitoba, and I have been a hiring manager, but I feel like something is not right with the culture here. Any advice? Well, I know a little bit about Manitoba. Like, what do you mean by I later got a regret? That means like someone gave you a bad reference? Is that what that means? Because like that would be an obvious problem that you would then have to fix, right? So basic rules about references, like make sure that anyone you give as a reference, make sure you talk to them first and say like, hello, I'd very much like to use you as a reference for, job applications that I might be submitting. Is that okay? And if they say yes, then you say, do you feel you would be able to give me a good reference? And then hopefully they say yes. If they don't say yes, you don't use them, right? So it's like doing basic things like this, and make sure that, the people that you're giving as references are people you have good relationships with. Like, it's not somebody you've barely talked to in your life, and they might not really know you that well or care about you that much. So that's obvious stuff to do, right? But the asking for 3 references when you're doing the final interview, that is normal. There's nothing necessarily fishy about that. There's a different culture between Manitoba, like Manitoba specifically, and some parts of the interior of Canada, and some other places in Canada. Like Toronto, Vancouver, there's a lot more innovation. There's a lot more risk taking. There's stiffer competition. Manitoba, it's much more laid back, conservative, and they're averse to taking risks. So I've talked about this extensively. We've been around for 20 years. We're going to be around certainly for another 20 years. Why rock the boat? Why reinvent the wheel? Let's just hire another person that has the same experience. Let's not take a chance on anyone new that brings in new skills, that comes from an area where we're unfamiliar, things like that. Whereas if you're in a more fast-moving, competitive part of the world, they're willing to jump on any kind of new thing that will give them an edge to outmaneuver their competition. Competition is fierce. We've been around for a while, but we may not be around for 20 years unless we are really on our A game. So we're looking for any little thing that will give us an edge. And that extends to hiring. We're willing to take more risks on people that have new skills, not just more people with the old skills, right? Where did I leave off? This thing keeps jumping on me. Somebody mentioned Manitoba. Here we go. Oh, someone says, how do you feel about job hopping? It can go either way. I have job hopped in the sense that I'd work at a place maybe 2 years and then jump. Now, if you're job hopping by working at a place for 2 months, usually that is regarded as a problem. Okay. But a year, somewhere in there is kind of the watershed, like the cutoff, where if it's less than a year, it might be regarded as a red flag, especially if you've done it more than once. More than a year, it probably won't be in most situations. But you may have to explain why you didn't stay there longer. So be prepared for that. A great answer, by the way, if this applies to you, I'm not suggesting you lie, but if this applies to you, is to say something like, well, the job that they hired me for, it soon morphed into a job that was completely unrecognizable. And they were getting me to do things that did not speak to my strengths or my interest. And it was not what I was hired for. And I don't mind, I'm flexible, I don't mind, taking on new things. But it went to an extreme length. And for that reason, I felt that it wasn't a good fit, something like that. So that's why I'm here applying for this job, because this does speak to my strengths and my interest, something like that. Okay. Thank you, M Star. AKA Tomb. No, I did that one. Lyakos 12 says, appreciate the answer. Explained everything clearly and you were realistic about it. You provide great value. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lyakos. And I'm sorry if I completely mispronounced your name. It's no slight intended. Felix. The real answer is, if they don't contact you back, you wouldn't want to work there anyway. Yeah, you could look at it that way. It just wasn't a good match, Maybe you want to work there, but they don't perceive you as being valuable or something. You know what I mean? That's not a good match. They could be completely out to lunch. A lot of people that make judgments in this situation are completely out to lunch. That's what you got to remember, right? They're going on the odds. They're going on basically heuristics, and statistical probability. Usually that's wrong. Not to mention the fact that it's extremely hard to spot talent. And then on top of it, I don't want to make blanket statements here, but I will say this. A lot of recruiters, not all of them, but some of them are not the sharpest tool in the shed, okay? And they don't have a lot of experience with people. They have a lot less experience with people than they think. And on top of that, we have we have data, we've had data for many, many years that shows that job interviews are very, very poor ways of selecting candidates. The only problem is that we have no realistic alternative. There are alternatives, but they're very, very labor intensive. They're very expensive. They have a lot more work and time involved. They give you a clearer picture, but it's not practical for companies to employ those processes for all their hiring needs, because it would be so expensive. You need so much time and people to do it, right? They employ those for executive roles and things, but not with worker level stuff. So it's a very imprecise process anyway. So you can disregard the results. If it doesn't work out, it's no reflection on you. Beyond you doing a few basic due diligence stuff, it's really not on you. It's the biggest factor, like I said in a recent video, is random chance. That's what determines the outcome of these things. AKM Tomb says, as a follow-up to the above, would you deal with prospective employers, or how do you deal with prospective employers who insist on only references who are current or former supervisors? Once again, that's not uncommon, and it's not a red flag. Some companies do that, and that's just their requirement. Now, sometimes it's not possible, okay? That's the flaw with this. For example, I got a job once where they needed 9 references, 3 previous bosses, 3 previous peers, and 3 previous subordinates. That's how they did that. And I had to like contact these people I hadn't talked to in years and say, I know you barely remember me, but can I use you as a reference? Like this kind of thing. So, but you know how it goes, right? Like a lot of companies, they, or organizations, they have all these tools to sort of like whittle down the pool of candidates down to 1, right? They just use this as yet another one of those tools. Like of the 5 finalists, only 3 of them could provide this type of references in their entirety. So like, okay, so there we go. We eliminate 2. Now it's the final 3 instead of the final 5. They just use that as another sort of refining tool, right? I don't think it's good or bad. I mean, like, for example, this can be an issue if you're migrating halfway around the world. Maybe you've had one job, you're sort of an immigrant, you've had one job in your host country, and you did a great job. You worked out really well, and you're ready to take the next step. Maybe you've been in this role for 20 years, but you worked for 18 years in your home country, but then you moved and you've only worked for 2 years in your host country in that role. It might be kind of hard providing references from halfway around the world. They might not be well regarded as valid because the recruiter calls them up. They might not speak the same language. They wouldn't know, like who is this person? They're in this other country. I don't know what their standards are there. I don't know what their hiring practices are there, or they might not regard it highly or something, So there's all kinds of reasons why that might have practical difficulties. But it's not necessarily a statement that, oh, this is a bad company or they're doing something underhanded. It's just something they've chosen to require for their hires. It can also, like to look at it pessimistically, it can signify that they're just paranoid. They don't have any confidence in their ability to pick the right person. So they try and cover their butt by asking for things like this. And they say, well, we checked out all these references, so no one can come back and blame them and say, you picked the wrong person. What's going on? It can probably be something like that too. Josh Man says, thank you. I've texted our mutual friends to discuss this, and I'll consider asking him if it doesn't work out. Excuse me. I've texted our mutual friends to discuss this, and I'll consider asking him. If it doesn't work out, I'll consider the left hook followed by the upper. Yes. Make sure you scream when you do it, right? I mean, if you're going to left hook somebody, do it like they do in those old movies, where they let out this blood-curdling scream with every move they make, right? Like, don't be afraid to scare people. Mir Ali says, during resignation process, do I have to mention the new company where No, do not do that, or I'm going to be employed. Is there any professional way to decline not to say? Yes. What you do is you say, I'm sorry, that's confidential. Goodbye. That's what you say, okay? So that's the professional way of doing it. It is none of their business where you are going. And the reason why you don't want to mention where you're going to when you resign is because it has been known that companies will do their best to sabotage you in your new job. They can call up the new company and say, hey, I'm so-and-so person. They might not give their real identity and say, I just heard this thing about this employee. I worked with them for many years. I just think you should know that they have this personal problem, right? They were caught stealing, right? It's all fake, but they're just trying to sabotage your new job, maybe in the hopes that you come crawling back to them, and then they can get away with giving you a salary cut. It's unfortunate, but stuff like that has been known. Do not say where you're going. Do not give them details. Do not tell them the name of your new manager. Do not tell them the name of the recruiter that hired you. Keep it confidential. It is none of their business. Just like if you have a credit card number, that is none of their business also. This is the same thing. Okay? Sure, they can ask you. They can ask you what your credit card number is too. But how would you respond to that? You'd say, I'm sorry, that's personal, that's confidential. So no, I'm not giving that to you. And if you're resigning, the next thing you would say is, bye, right? You know, that's usually how this stuff works. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. You got to protect yourself there, Mir, if I'm saying that right. I'm sure I'm not. I'm sorry if I'm not. Hi, current boss is challenging me with the tasks which are not in responsibility of mine job position, adding in what? CC her boss. Okay, so carbon copy his boss. IT is the first situation in my job history. I'm starting to look for a job. It continues. What is the best answer? Why are you changing job when you're changing for the same position, but to a different company? I have to change because I'm doing people others' job and I've mobbing. Okay, listen. I don't know where in the world you are or what the culture is for your industry or for your organization, like how people normally do things and what's expected of them. But I gotta say, just because someone asks you a question doesn't mean you have to answer them with full and complete information. A lot of times companies abuse that privilege. They ask you for all kinds of personal confidential information that's none of their business. It doesn't involve them, right? And they have no legal right to knowing that information. And they intentionally use social pressure to try and convince you to give that information, right? They'll say, you need to tell me where you're going. You need to tell me so I can put it down on this form, or else we're going to have a problem when you leave, right? Like, they can use all these techniques. They can apply the pressure. The reality is, you don't have any legal obligation to tell them any of that. That's your personal business. And you have the freedom to work where you want. You don't need their approval to go work for another company, right? Like in most countries in the world, certainly. So a lot of companies will abuse this privilege. You're used to doing what they say. So they order you to do things that you don't have to do. And the reason that they ask these things is because it serves them, but it doesn't serve you. It's not in your own interest to do this. It doesn't help you. They're not helping you. They're not working with you. You're leaving. You've said, nope, I'm ending this relationship. Right? So remember that. Always keep that in mind. Just because they ask you something doesn't mean that you have to give that information. Okay? That goes the same in job interviews too. Right? Now, in a job interview, if you refuse to give them information that they're wanting you to give, they can turn around and say, well, I'm sorry, then, you don't get the job. We'll pick somebody else. Fine. Okay. The fact that they're asking those types of questions, like they need your credit card number at a job interview, things like that would be a red flag. You don't want to work for them anyway. It's unfortunate, but that's the truth. And the best thing that you can do is not cozy up to these people that have shown themselves to be bad, right? But when you're leaving a company, it's coming to an end. You've initiated the fact that it's ending, right? So you are not needing anything further from them, right? So there's no incentive for you to just dance to all these silly requests that may be bad for you, okay? That's what I would say about this. AKM Tomb says, thanks for your answer. I appreciate it. Just to clarify, I have very reliable references. They're confirmed giving a good reference. Okay, good. Then it should work out well. At least the reference part should work out well for you. Okay, so I think I covered everyone's question. If I missed your question, just repost it, like copy paste, repost it. Because as I talk, my feed just jumps on me, and I don't know how much it's jumped. So if I have missed a question, I apologize. It's not intentional. Just repost it. Mighty Mojo says, "Hi, Bill. What is, in your opinion, the best way to land a job in a large corporation? HRs and hiring managers usually tell to go browse their job posting page. What type of networking would be useful?" Okay, that's like saying, just to give you an understanding, that's like saying, what is a job and how do I get one, right? There's a lot to that answer. There's much more that I could explain here. That's why I created a course that talks all about that. That's why it has to be in a course. It can't be in a video or a couple of videos. It's involved. There's a lot of principles at play to do the networking thing. It's what executives do, basically. That's how you get executive jobs, right? You don't apply to, here's a job for a CEO, and then you apply, here's my resume, and then, you go to a job interview, and then you're talking to a recruiter who doesn't know anything about anything, and they're saying, "Tell me about yourself," and you say the wrong thing, and they go, "Oh, well, you won't be a good CEO." It doesn't work like that. It's a completely different process, right? So basically, you're using that process. You don't have to be an executive to do it. It's just that most people who get to the executive level tend to have a lot of those social skills, conversational skills, networking skills. They understand how to project themselves in a professional way, things like this. So because they have those, that's how they use those to talk to people directly. Now, you don't have to be an executive to do this. These are not that hard to learn. I built a management consulting business doing this, where I contacted CEOs of all kinds of companies in my hometown. I can't remember how many. It's so long ago. But it was 200 CEOs. It was quite a lot, and I did informational interviews with most of them, and all this. I didn't know them beforehand, and I built this business. And anyone can do this because they didn't know me. They didn't know who I was, and they hadn't even heard of my company in a lot of cases. So, what you're doing is you're just learning some of these basic skills, and you are using them to get ahead. Now, to try and answer your question, basically what you're doing is, there's many, many things you can do. But the thing that I would recommend, the easiest thing to get into, if you're not a networking type person, you're an introvert, you don't really deal with people a lot, is something that I call, for want of a better term, networking on demand. You don't have any connections to this company or to this industry. Well, let's make some, right? So what I cover in this course is I basically take you through LinkedIn, how to use LinkedIn and Google Maps. Those two together, if you want to do this purely online to really set everything up, is you can use those two tools. Now, I have done a video, where I have walked you through this as I do it on screen, how this process works that I'm referring to right now, this networking on demand done online. And that's actually linked to in the description box of this video, because I've had to reference it several times. I just added it to the description box of a lot of my live streams so that people can just go there. The name of the video is called How Successful People Get Jobs. So if you look at the description box, there'll be a link to a video called How Successful People Get Jobs. It's one of my videos. Watch that, and that will show you graphically kind of one of the easiest things that anybody can do, right? And that'll get you started, But there's a lot of principles, how to talk to somebody, how to, basic rules, you don't talk all about yourself because you're a stranger to them. They don't care. You have to ask them about them and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of principles at play. If you really want to learn how to do that, I put it all into this course. There's a link in the description if you're interested in taking that. But that's the kind of thing that allows, especially introverts, who don't go to a lot of social events, They don't do it by going to industry events and schmoozing with people. They don't go that route. They do a more targeted kind of thing. This is how those people can do it, where basically what you do is you discover the people online, you connect with them online, you put yourself forward for any possible positions online, if the person happens to be looking for a job, for candidates, okay? We're thinking of hiring a forklift person. I really got to get around to telling HR and setting that whole thing up and getting an employee. And then you fall right in their lap and you say, hey, I'm a fully qualified forklift operator. If ever you're looking for a forklift operator, let me know, because I know you guys do great work. And you contacted them because you discovered that they were nearby and they owned a warehouse and they do inventory management. And, that's usually the people that employ forklift operators. So you sent them a message and you said, hi, here I am. I do this. If ever you need help with that, let me know. That's the simplest possible thing you could do. Or you could contact them and say, I'm very much interested in learning, like getting your expert opinion on this industry, where it's going. I'm trying to learn a bit about it. Could you spare me 30 minutes of your time? And then you go down and meet them. They say, sure, come on down. Like, my office is here. Come and meet me here. I'm free at 2 p.m. on Thursday. If you can meet me there, I'll be happy to give you half an hour of my time. Right? And you would wonder, why would somebody do that? Right? That's something that people who have never done this and don't know anything about it, they might wonder. It's flattery. Has anyone ever said, I think what you do is great? Has anyone ever said that to you? I would love to learn what you know about this. Could you spare me just half an hour? Like, would that be possible? Most people will say, sure, yeah, it's kind of nice. Yeah, I'll be happy to tell you what I know. Right? You'd be surprised how well that works. There's a lot more to it, but these are some of the principles. And the solution starts with that kind of thing, okay? So probably the best thing you can do for yourself is to learn a bit how that stuff works, because it will only serve to open a lot of doors for you. The vast majority of jobs that exist are not posted. And the reason they're not posted is because they get filled by doing activities like this before you need to post them. Okay? Now, you don't have to take my word for this. If this sounds weird to you or something, go and do your own research. You'll see that that's true. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Check out that video if you want more specific information. And then if you want the full meal deal that I would recommend, check out that course. Okay, sorry, this thing keeps jumping on me. So where did I leave off? Okay, I did all that. Okay, here we go. So that was Mighty Mojo. What is your opinion the best way to land a job market? So for a large corporation, you could go through the recruiter route. Now, if it's a standardized job, like if you're an accountant and you have an accounting qualification and you've worked as an accountant, and they have a job opening for an accountant, you can apply, right? Like if it's very standard like that, you can go through this recruiter publicly posted job process, what I call the standard channels, and it can work. If you have a more non-standard career path, you've done something over here, you've done something over here, you've done something over here, highly specialized job titles that not a lot of people are familiar with, but in those jobs, you've done all of these, standard things that are very, very valuable and very transportable, and you want to try and convince someone that, maybe you're making a little bit of a career jump, but still using a lot of those skills. Then you would go the networking route, right? And you talk to a hiring manager as opposed to a recruiter. Okay, in a big corporation. But there's specific people you have to talk to, okay? The more I get into this, the bigger it is. Like, you really have to learn all the principles at play for it to make sense. Okay, for example, you can't just go to any hiring manager. The people at the bottom, they don't do that kind of thing. They can't really help you anyway. The people in the middle, they're usually too busy to help you, and it's not part of their job to face the public. But the people at the top, the executives, what most people don't realize is that, first of all, it's part of their job to take unsolicited queries from the public. Somebody sends you a message. Can I talk to you? I'd love to get your opinion on this. Could we arrange a meeting? That could be a potential partner. That could be a regulator. That could be a potential supplier. That could be a potential institutional customer. That could be the member of the press. You don't know. It's part of your job to field those. If you just give an automatic, like, F you kind of response to people, I don't know you. What do you want to talk to me about? No, go away. If you have that attitude, that's bad for your business. Okay? You're also representing yourself in a very unprofessional way publicly, right? So they are, first of all, in tune to receiving those kind of requests. Secondly, they actually have more time to spend on requests like that than the people in the middle. They're usually worked very hard, the middle management, right? It's the people up here that have the time, and it's part of their job to respond to things like that. So, so you can't go to people here, you can't go to people, you have to go to these people, right? It's a lot simpler than you think. I mean, I did it. There's a lot to it. Okay. So that's what I'd say. It's nothing I can really explain in its entirety here. Okay. Where was I here? Okay. Resignation process. Golek says, okay, thank you. You're welcome. Mighty Mojo. Personally, I know about a number of rules preventing managers using their connections as they have to be objective on milling their positions. How to get around this? Well, it depends what we're talking about. But you know what? Do you live in a free country with, do you have freedom of thought? Can you control where you work? Of course you can. So, those might apply to conflicts of interest when you're currently employed with a company. Okay? So yes, they might have some of those. But beyond that, there's no restrictions. Nobody can tell you where to work and where you can't work, right? You have the freedom to move from one job to another if you want. Conversely, they also have the freedom to hire who they want. They will have to justify it sometimes, right? But they can, like we all have self-determination. So anyway, look, it's about learning about the real world, how the world actually works, okay? Learning about networking. Networking, it exists because it taps into what I would refer to as the real world. It's how people behave, right? If someone calls you up and say, like, look, I don't know you. This is not at work. This is at home. And somebody calls you up and says, look, I don't know you. You don't know me. My name is X. I'm a fan of this, or I'm an aspiring bookkeeper. I'm a student at school. I'm studying bookkeeping. One day I would like to be an accountant. Now I understand that you're a fully qualified accountant who is a major partner in one of the prominent accounting firms in the city. And, I would just love to sit down with you for half an hour and talk to you, get your, 2 cents on the accounting industry, what skills are needed for the future, where it's going. Would that be okay? Like, would I be able to do that? Is, maybe half an hour, you name the date, time, place. If somebody contacted you and said something like that. Now, some people would say, no, I don't have time for that. I don't know who you are. Other people would say, sure, I'll tell you what, if you can meet me right here at this time and place, I'll be there. Sure, I'll talk to you for half an hour. I'll be in this Starbucks or something at this date and time. Come and see me there, and I can give you half an hour, right? Like, do you have the right to do that? Of course you do. Is it okay that you do that? Of course it is. If the person agrees to it and you don't pull any shenanigans, you show up, you ask about the things that you said you were going to ask about, you don't harass them, you don't probe for highly confidential personal information, as long as you're professional about it and, there's a sort of protocol that's observed, there's no reason why you can't do that, right? And then afterwards, let's pretend that you had a very positive conversation. You found it very informative. They found it very enjoyable. It's kind of stroked that person's ego. Here's somebody who enjoys listening to what I have to say about accounting, and they seem to really value it. And I feel like I'm helping them, you know? And they appeared to me very professional and very, gracious, and they were very polite. And, I don't regret any part of that. I think it was a positive experience. Then maybe that person contacts the accountant, that student contacts the accountant 2 weeks later and says, like, I see that you have an opening at your firm. Your firm is actually hiring bookkeepers. Does it make sense for me to apply for this? And the accountant might say, sure, yeah, I think, I know you haven't quite finished your qualification, but, they're not hiring for someone to start now. They're hiring for someone to start in the fall or something. Go for it. And then when you apply for the job and you get to the interview, you could say, oh, I actually know this person. They suggested I apply. Like, do you have the right to do any of this? Of course you do. You're not violating any kind of code or law or protocol. That's how networking works. You're just reaching. You're the one that takes the initiative to do something that is perfectly fine, but you haven't been given explicit permission to do that. You just reach out to somebody. Like, is that now? If someone says no, go away, and you do, that's fine, right? So this is kind of what you're tapping into, right? To me, it's kind of an alien concept of, do I have the right to do this? It's like, or do I have permission to do this? It's like, of course you do. I can stop a stranger on the street and say, excuse me, do you have the time? Or can I ask you, like, how do I get to this place? Do you have the right to ask them that? Of course you do. Do they have an obligation to work with you and answer you? No. But if they choose to, what's the harm? Anyway, there's my rant for today. Now, I probably lost about half the number of viewers just going through that. Where was I? So I didn't really answer your question, but I can't, because I don't know what constraints they're under. I don't know what the situation is. It's going to depend on the specific situation. If there are specific constraints where they say, you can't talk to this person, now if the only thing I could envision where that does happen is where you have conflicts of interest or things like NDAs, non-disclosure agreements that you sign as a condition of your employment. They say, you cannot do this. If we find out that you're doing this, number one, that's grounds for immediate termination. Number two, we may even, initiate litigation against you depending on the details. So, if something like that is written into their contract, maybe they will intentionally shy away from anything resembling that because they don't know who you are. They don't know what this is. That's something that I could see happening. But barring those special cases, you can talk to anyone you want and you can ask for anything you want. Whether people agree to it and how far it goes is another matter. Depends on how you do it. Golek says, I watched your video about questions why you want to change a job. When the reason is toxic culture, you cannot tell this to a recruiter. Talking about growth is bought, always good because it is similar. Sorry, you lost me there. Position on different company. What do you suggest? Okay, well, your question got a little garbled there, but yes. When they ask you, why did you leave your last company? There's a question behind the question. They're trying to see if, first of all, there's any red flags in your past. If you say, the boss was an idiot, I gave him a left hook and an uppercut, and I did my patented scream when I did it, and then they fired me. I don't understand why. Something like that, they'll say, okay, now we're revealing the dirt on you. We know that you're the type of person that has done that kind of behavior. We likely will not hire you now because there's a likelihood that you will now behave like that if we hire you in this job, right? The other thing they're checking for is if you're going to badmouth people. I've talked about this before. If you say, oh yeah, they're a bunch of jerks, They treat their employees like crap. And I wasn't going to take that kind of oppression anymore. So I marched up to the boss and I told him right to his face, you can't do that. And then they fired me. I don't understand why. What a bunch of jackasses. If you say something like that, that's signaling the type of person you are. Not just what you did, but now you're willing to talk about people behind their backs. You've got a very negative view of people. Now, look, all of that could be totally true. You are a reasonable person who had a reasonable opinion about how those people acted. That could all be true. But remember, you're making a first impression here. So if the only thing they know about you is that you have brown hair, you're 8'11", and you punched out your last boss because they were a jerk and you hate their guts and you're telling everyone that wants to hear, that's a red flag for them, right? So that's how they're checking to see if you're a high-risk candidate when it comes to that element, right? So you can't say anything negative. So if you say, that company had toxic culture, that's basically the same thing, just not as extreme. So don't say anything negative. You don't want to say anything negative about anyone, including yourself, even when they ask you these stupid pointed questions like, what was the worst boss you ever had and what did they do to make you think they're bad, right? Pointed question. It seems like it's hard to get out of answering that question without saying something negative. And you could say, well, I don't really recall having like a really bad boss. I mean, the last boss I had, we were actually friends. We just had a difference of opinion on, what, would be the next step for me. And I chose to go this way. And that's why I'm here applying for this job, because this is the direction I most want to go in, not kind of what they were wanting me to do, or something like that. Like you could work on your answer a bit, but you're not falling into these traps. Okay, I got to wrap this up soon, so I got about 4 questions left. Asm says, unfortunately, in the country where I work, it's necessary to provide the name of the company to link my visa. Now, what do you mean by visa? Are you talking about a work visa or are you talking about a credit card? Because I was talking about a credit card earlier. So I'm not sure if that's linked to that. Mighty Mojo says, thank you for sharing your thoughts on all of these questions. Great inputs. You're absolutely welcome, Mighty Mojo. You guys let me know what you're dealing with and what you're wondering about, and then I know what to speak to so that people presumably are interested. But that's the end of the questions so far today. There are 26 of you guys here. Thank you for joining me. Once again, I want to thank all the participants. We got some very intelligent questions today. Hiring is just, it's a very deceptive process. People intentionally don't tell you what's really going on. For a variety of reasons. It's left for you to figure out how this process works, why things may not have worked out, and what to do about it. And as I say, on top of it, what I believe further complicates matters for a lot of people is that a lot of people talking about hiring tend to be recruiters. Nothing wrong with recruiters. I've taught recruiters. Some of them are very, very good at their job. Some of them really aren't. But, so job seekers tend to get this slightly artificial view that like you have to deal with a recruiter and you have to respond to a posted job. You really don't, okay? And as I say, don't take my word for any of this if this is new information for you. Go do your own independent research. You will find that this is true. Most people do not get hired by applying to internet jobs. Most people get hired initially through some form of networking. And there are many, many techniques and many types of networking. You can do it purely online. You can do it purely in person. There's all kinds of things that can happen there. And so, in a nutshell, the basic reason for this is because a personal recommendation goes a long way. On paper, you could say you've done all these great things, and that could be true. But the fact is, they don't know you. So they don't know if you're lying through your teeth, or you're some kind of criminal, or you're some kind of maniac. They don't know. But if there's someone there that says, "Oh, I've worked with that person. They're pretty good. You should look at them closely." they'll go, oh, okay. Immediately that person goes to the top of the pile. Oh, you've worked with them. Okay. Now, you've worked with us for many years. We trust you. And you're telling me that you trust this person? Okay, that's good. That takes a lot of the work and the uncertainty out of what we're doing, you know? So, if you have personal connections, great. But most people don't. So you have to sort of create them on demand. And that's what I'm a big believer in. That's what I've done. That's what I highly recommend. That's what executives do, you know? And in the process of learning how to do this, not only will it enable you to get a good job usually, but also you develop all kinds of really powerful social skills that can take you much further, like just in their own right. So that's why I recommend it. So check out some of my videos that talk about that if you're interested. If you really want to jump in and learn it all from beginning to end, where I walk you through the entire process and show you multiple things that can be done, check out this course. I have that course here called my Get Hired course. That's where I put like everything into a course, and you can take that. There's a link in the description. Anyway, I see there's a couple more. I'll just read these last couple of questions and I'll sign off. Okay, thank you for Mighty Mojo. That sounds like something you posted earlier that I spent a long time responding to. How do I get around this? Well, the obvious thing would be to go to a place where they don't have those rules. I've never even heard of like something like that other than what I've already talked about with NDAs and conflicts of interest. Now, it could be like an anti-nepotism policy or something like that, which, okay, I can understand that. Mighty Mojo, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Not a problem. You're welcome to Maxime and Overlogy is clearly how you say that word. Should you work actively in getting promoted to your first manager role, or should you keep a low profile and let the people come to you? I can't answer that because it depends entirely what your goals are. Do you want to be a manager? In what environment are you working? Are you talking about internally, or are you talking about, if you're working as a worker, do you apply for a job at another company where they're looking for managers? Right? I've done both of those. I've been promoted, and then I've also left a job at one position so I could get a job at a higher position at another company. I've felt the need to do that when your boss is like, they have another 20 years before they retire, and it's an environment where they care a lot about seniority, which I thought was very silly in the context of that organization. So for me, I left and got a manager job at a different company. Other places I've been promoted internally because they know you, they see you do good work, they like you, so you become a natural choice if there's a vacancy up here, right? Working with the people that you've had to report to before. So, it can go both ways. It depends what your situation is and what your goals are. Both can work, but if you didn't tell me anything more than that, then I would just assume that what you should do is is take the initiative and go for the manager role. Don't just sit and wait for someone to notice you, because my personal opinion is that you're going to be waiting a while for that. Most people tend to not care about others. They have the spotlight effect. They care about themselves. They don't really notice others. And if they do notice others, they like them where they are. They don't want to necessarily promote them automatically. So that would be my recommendation to that. Mighty Mojo says something's wrong with your chat. This is in case you really want to be a manager. Reason I ask is most of the seniors I've talked to usually say promotions came to them. I've been told patience and consistency. Well, that's a gamble, isn't it? You see, when I started out, it was sort of in the 80s, and what was going on at the time was there were people that were hired in the 70s that were promised all kinds of things. And it was in this situation, it was a very seniority-based environment. And they were told, don't worry, right now you guys are the junior guys, but in a few years, you will be more senior, in which case you will get a lot of these perks and things that you're wanting. What actually happened was they didn't hire anyone else for like 15 years. So the people that were junior and they were the last to be hired, they stayed the junior employees for a very long time. And by the time they started to move up, they did not get all the things that were promised. All those were abolished by the time they got up. So it was an empty promise. They were expecting the company to take care of them, give them a nice, generous pension, give them a lot of benefits, not lay them off for trivial reasons, and so on. And this was a common thing that was happening at the time, where in the 80s, companies started to change their attitude. This is where treating people as a number rather than as a person really took over. And so they just didn't honor these commitments. They got rid of pensions, they got rid of benefits, they got rid of all kinds of other privileges. And these people felt really burned, and rightly so. So the problem is when you're told, just be patient, wait your turn, keep your head down, sometimes that can be true. Maybe you're just not ready. You think you know it all, but you really don't. Maybe you just don't have certain things, and you can't see that. That's a possibility. However, other times, and I remember feeling this way when I was in my 20s and 30s, was it's BS, it's an empty promise, and I can see what's going to happen. You're promising me this, and you want me to stay and mind my place and stay in my role, when really I'll be waiting there forever for anyone to notice me and give me anything. I have to make it happen myself, meaning I have to leave and go to a place where they're hiring someone in the supervisor role, and then I can get that. If I'm truly qualified to be a supervisor, somebody sooner or later will recognize that and hire me for a supervisor role. Right? That was the theory. So the only person who can answer that question is you. Whether that, which one of those describes you. And if you don't know, and if you think it might be the latter, try it. Apply for supervisor jobs. If you get one, great. There you go. There's your answer. You are qualified and you're in the role now like you deserve. If nobody will hire you as a supervisor, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe, not necessarily, but maybe there's something you're missing. Find out what it is. Tack it on. And then you'll earn into that role. Or you apply somewhere else and then you'll get it this time. Okay, I have to get rolling. So thanks to everybody. You guys are awesome. I'll be back next Monday with another one of these, another episode of Get Hired, where I take your questions. I wish you nothing but the best. Best of luck. The more you know, the further you'll go. And I'll see you soon. Take care.